All righty, good people. Welcome to our third installment of Occupy Valk this evening, where Mr. Matt Johnson, a senior instructor of history, will be talking to us about we the people. Just a little bit of background for this event for those of you who are new to the Occupy Valk series. The whole point of this series is a call out, an echo to the 1960s civil rights movement, where at the University of Michigan in 1962, a bunch of faculty staged teach-ins where they would crowd hallways of academic buildings to teach about social justice, its history, its politics, and its impact on society. This event that we have here is our version of this. Granted, you get to sit in far more comfortable chairs and not crowded into little bitty hallways without air conditioning, mind you. So, without further ado, Mr. Matt Johnson.
Okay, thanks. Today I'd like to talk about we the people and citizenship and civics and civility. So hopefully you bear with me for about an hour and we'll be able to get out of here with hopefully some new knowledge and maybe a little inspiration. So we the people revisited, civics, citizens, and civility. On a certain level, I have some experience with the culture wars that we have had in the last couple of years. So I consider myself a veteran of culture wars. In 2018, I engaged in said endeavor of becoming a city councilman. 3 years later, that's what it did to me. Happy like that. Yeah, right. At the end of this time as a member of the city council, I felt beat up, beat down, deflated. I was exhausted. I've been called a communist, a socialist, and a fascist. I was told I was unpatriotic and a coward, that I didn't understand the Constitution of the United States. My address was disseminated along with my place of employment to those that disagreed with the decisions that we had made as a council. There were calls to have demonstrations outside of my home and to disrupt my place of work. I was angry, I was frustrated, I was disappointed, and I was delusioned, and I was done. Enter the most contentious election in a very long time. The 2021 race for Maryville City Council. It was insane. Okay. 4 different candidates, a lot of different positions, with Dan and Merrill and John McBride ending up winning. And wow, was that a contentious election. Huge turnout. Dan and John both won, winning a 4-way race. Although I do recall a certain candidate from 2018 who won a 4-way race as well, but with a higher percentage of the vote. But I digress. One of the elements that really bothered me was the campaign slogan, and not because it was John. I don't really know John. He seems like a good, decent fellow. But his campaign slogan was, "We the people should matter." And that really, man, that got under my skin. The people of Maryville do matter to me. I spent almost 10 years of my life serving the community as a member of Maryville Fire and Rescue. I ran for city council back in 2018 with the desire to give back to this community by using a seat on the Maryville City Council to improve emergency services so the people in this community could be better served and made safer by our first responders. Hell, at one point, the 9th of March, 2020, at around 5:45 in the morning, I was on fire, literally trying to protect this community. And then the pandemic hit. And that is when things got intense, as more and more community members and outsiders got ever more intense with their vitriol and ever more personal in their attacks on certain members of the council, that I was done. I was out and I was bitter. Man, that slogan bugged me. And it left a real negative feeling inside of me. So let's see here. So I think back about it. I think it was May or June when Dr. Daly prompted me again for the title of my Occupy Valk talk. I had no real idea what I wanted to talk about, but I knew it would somehow come back to that phrase. Right? Man, I was going to let them know that I understood the Constitution better than they did. I had a greater grasp on how a representative democracy worked. I was going to let them have a piece of my mind, right? I was finally going to unleash all the angst that had been trapped behind my mask whilst I was on the council. I was finally going to let loose that beast that occasionally tries to claw its way out of my chest when I get really, really angry. I was going to rain down truth from the ivory tower. We were going to deconstruct the social contract, and I was going to demonstrate my superior intellect and destroy mine enemies and reveal to them the blowhard buffoons I knew them to be. And then I was reminded of another turn of phrase. We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. Providing me a moment of pause, kind of reflect. The common theme here is civic engagement. And for those of you who had me in class before, you know how much I champion voting and civic engagement. So who is this we, and who are the people? So we're gonna get a little bit of background history on how we, the people, has expanded over time. Right, to give you an idea of who that we is and who the people are. This is a question that has been debated throughout American history. William H. Hastie, the first black federal judge in the United States, appointed in 1937, wrote, quote, "Democracy is a process, not a static condition. It is becoming rather than being. It can be easily lost, but it is never fully won." Much of the history of the United States reflects this ongoing process, as individuals and groups have attempted to make the country better, reflect the democratic ideals expressed in our founding documents. At first, in terms of defining who we the people were, we're going to look to the Nationalization Act of 1790. This is the act upon which we determine who was qualified for citizenship. And the law limited naturalization to free white persons of good character, thus excluding Native Americans, conservatives, slaves, free black people, and others as history progressed. Now, if found to be of good character, they would take an oath of allegiance to the Constitution. Citizenship would be granted to all of their children, aged up to 21. The wife of said person of good character did not need to apply for citizenship, as she was considered under the authority of her husband. So she would have automatic citizenship because she was kind of seen as an extension of him, or at least his will. New Jersey, the first and only state to legally enfranchise women in 1790. The New Jersey Constitution's election law included the words he or she. So for a time, both men and women, if they hit certain requirements in New Jersey, could vote. African Americans could also vote if they met property and residence requirements, but that was changed in 1807 when the state legislature restricted suffrage to tax-paying white male citizens only. Next, if you kind of look at time and how the franchise is extended, the next major shift comes in terms of property rights. You look at a map from 1800, you can see that property qualifications was the major indicator of who could not vote, the tax-paying qualifications, and then universal male suffrage. Jump ahead 30 years. Fewer states, 3, are requiring property qualifications, ownership of property before you vote. The vast majority are requiring that you are a taxpayer in order to vote, and a few more have universal white male suffrage. So again, the franchise expands. You then jump to Reconstruction and the amendments that again expand that franchise. The 13th, ratified December 6, 1865. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist in the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. A move in the direction of expanding yet again that franchise. July 9, 1868. Now the 14th Amendment is passed. It has I know it has several clauses to it that are up there, or we had the big 3. The Citizenship Clause granted citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States. Due Process Clause declared that states may not deny any person of life, liberty, or property without due process and equal protection, so that a state may not deny any person within its jurisdiction equal protection of the laws. Another step. But what is it to be free? What is it to be a citizen if you cannot vote? And for me, there is an undeniable connection between citizenship and voting, particularly given our system of governance. It ought to be enshrined, in my ever so humble opinion. And in 1870, the 15th Amendment, we have again an expansion of that franchise. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of race, color, or previous conditions of servitude. The franchise expands. The women's suffrage movement was rekindled after the Civil War. In part, it was born out of an anger that women were not included in the 15th Amendment. It became clear after the Civil War that Black and white women had different views of why the right to vote was essential. White women were seeking the vote as a symbol of equality with their husbands and brothers. Black women, most of whom lived in the South, were seeking the ballot for themselves and their men as a means of racial uplift and protection. Now, Susan B. Anthony's take on the 14th, you can read that on your own, it's kind of lengthy, was the only question to be settled now is, are women persons? And I heartily believe any of our opponents will have the hardly believe any of our opponents will have the hardihood to say they are not. One of the problems with having glasses is I cannot wear them and see things at the same time, which is kind of odd. So please bear with me. She goes on to say, being persons then, women are citizens, and no state has a right to make any new law or enforce any old law that shall abridge their privileges or immunities. Hence, every discrimination against women in the constitutions and laws of the several states is today null and void, precisely as it is every one against Negroes. Now, the first sentence establishes that women are citizens, and the second settled whether or not they hold a place in society equal to that of all other persons. Now, she's going to get hauled before court, and this is one of those moments in history that I would love to be a fly on the wall or a squirrel on a rock eating a nut and watching what happens, right? Because she just, according to tradition, she goes off in that courtroom. And man, I'd love to have been a fly on that wall. Despite her very just on fire argument, Anthony was tried and convicted for, quote, the crime of having voted in the 1872 election and fined $100. She was not the only one that voted. There were several dozen women that went with her and voted. She was the one that was the test case. She refused to pay that fine. And it is not going to be until 1920 that women obtain the right to vote. A little closer to home, we have Minor versus Happersett in 1875. This is a Missouri case where a woman by the name of Virginia Minor took action trying to register to vote in St. Louis. 19. The court ruled unanimously that the right of suffrage was not protected by the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Quote, "It cannot for a moment be doubted that if it had been intended to make all citizens of the United States voters, the framers of the Constitution would have left it to that implication. So important a change in the condition of citizenship as it actually existed, if intended, would have been expressly declared." In other words, she fought the law and the law won as well. Women did not obtain the right to vote in the United States until 1920. And in fact, until 1922, a woman born in the United States would lose her citizenship if she married a foreigner. Right? She had to assume the citizenship of her husband. However, an American man could marry a foreign woman without losing his citizenship. And this position kind of assumed that the nation of the husband would grant her citizenship. And if it didn't have that policy, she would then be rendered stateless, right? Citizen of nowhere. 19th Amendment. The right of citizens of the United States to vote should not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. The franchise expands. 23rd Amendment. Ratified in March 1961. Has to do with voting in Washington, D.C. In layperson's terms, the amendment means that residents of the District of Columbia are able to vote for president and vice president. Again, the franchise expands. 24th Amendment, ratified January 23, 1964. The right of citizens of the United States to vote in any primary or other election for president or vice president, for electors, for president or vice president, for senators or representatives in Congress, shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state by reason of failing to pay any poll tax or other tax. The franchise expands. The 26th Amendment, ratified July 1st, 1971. The right of citizens of the United States who are 18 years of age or older, the right to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of age. Again, the franchise expands. Now, when I was researching this, I was trying to find something that would kind of indicate what our expectations are of those that want to be an American citizen. Right? For me, this has always been something I've always kind of struggled with. Right? I mean, I look at the difficulties that immigrants have, that those who want to become citizens have. I had the honor of assisting one of my students a number of years ago to become an American citizen. It was a fantastic feeling. The pride that he had on telling me, "Hey, MJ, I got it." It's a fantastic feeling. It made me reflect on what I have done to become an American citizen, what I have done to earn my American citizenship. And I've done nothing. Right? I am an American citizen for one very simple reason. My mother dropped me here. That's it. I didn't have to earn it. I didn't have to fight. I didn't have to work. I was simply, by the grace of God or by providence or luck, born in this place. I didn't deserve it. It was handed to me. And it always made me reflect on those that are going to fight to become American citizens. In time periods of strife, our citizenship requirements become looser. Why? Because we need individuals to serve in the military. So military service becomes a fast track for non-Americans to become American citizens. These individuals, and I've known some of them, right? I've met them. They are proud Americans, and they had to go through significant hoops, and also for those soldiers, put their lives on the line for a country that is not even theirs. yet. But their desire is such that they're willing to put it on the line to become an American citizen, and all I did was be born. Now, in this document, it's called the Citizens Almanac. I think the first edition of this was like in 2007. It's a handbook it's a handbook for citizens. Right? I'm gonna check that. Would-be citizens. Okay. It's an actually pretty interesting read. I ended up reading most of it. It's got a collection of the founding documents that are of great import to our nation, particularly powerful speeches by policymakers and activists, anthems, symbols of our nation, poems about our nation, right? By Walt Whitman, Ralph Waldo Emerson, etc. It really is, and I know I'm going to wax nostalgic here, okay, but it really is inspirational to go back and read and see the various manifestations of the potential of this country as it's captured by the words and deeds of others. Now, if you want to look it up, you can look it up under M76 revised 09/14 USCIS, and it'll pop up. That's not very romantic, so I would probably go with the Citizens Almanac, but it's free, right? Just download it, probably half of that and everything. And what it does is it highlights the freedoms, right? That these would-be Americans may someday enjoy if they're granted citizenship. It identifies those rights of would-be citizens, the freedom to express yourself, not only in word, but in how you pray or don't pray. Freedom of thought, freedom of association, the right to a prompt, fair trial by jury, something we take for granted, and that people coming from other places to this place may not even enjoy or understand the idea of a free trial, where you're not simply just disappeared off the street. The right to keep and bear arms. The right to vote and also to run in elections for public office. And the freedom to pursue life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It goes on. He talks about mandatory duties of would-be citizens. This is it, folks. As an American citizen, these are the 4 things that are required of you. That's it. Obey the law. Now it expands on that and says, and pay the fines and take the punishments for breaking that law. So it doesn't remove the idea of civil disobedience, right? That's still an expression as long as you're willing to break that law that you believe is unjust, break that law in order to bring attention to it, be willing to take the consequences. But as a citizen, it's a recognition that we are going to try our best to obey the law. Okay? I fail at this. I've broken a few of them. All right. Second requirement, paying taxes. Now, to me, this idea of paying taxes is a recognition that we are a collective, okay? That we work together. It's a recognition that roads don't grow out of the ground. It's a recognition that police, fire, teachers don't do their job just because they enjoy it. Well, volunteer firefighters do, but that's a different story. To serve on a jury when summoned. Why is this important? Because this is a place where you're judged by your peers. Registering for the selective service. A recognition that the world is a place of dangers, and that at times our nation has been forced to call on our young men to serve to the draft. Again, those 4, that's it. We go on, right? Other responsibilities, the suggested you might want to think about doing. Voting, not a requirement, It is a responsibility. It's on you, whether or not it's something that you want to do. But according to the documents that we give would-be American citizens, the expectation is voting and also staying informed. To not just follow what you think to be in a part of your party, right? It's the idea of staying informed and not just accepting what you are told by somebody on Twitter, but by taking the time to research it yourself. Have some doubt, right? This is the show me state. We should be some of the most educated voters because we have a propensity not to trust people. Show me the truth. Show me your work, right? So I encourage all of you in terms of staying informed, do your own research. Trust your sources, but verify your sources. Verify their sources and make your own judgments. Another responsibility, a suggested responsibility, not a requirement, but a suggestion, community involvement. It's a recognition that we are stronger together, that we rely on one another, inevitably. And it is incumbent upon us, at least we check that, it is suggested for those would-be, potentially American citizens to stay connected to their community, to get engaged, to fix a problem they see. Practicing tolerance. Again, this is something that the United States government has within its assumed requirements of would-be citizens that they are going to practice tolerance and a recognition that this is a place of many. That our differences are where we get our strengths. You can see that in the worlds of metals. Some of the strongest metals are alloys. Practicing tolerance and passing it on. Passing on to the next generation. Not only the stories of our great victories, but also our great difficulties. Now, I look at the world and I look at people around me, and some are very optimistic, some are very pessimistic, some are realists, et cetera, and I try to put myself into what exactly I am. Right? So somebody asks me, what is your philosophy of life? How do you see the world? Well, as a historian, I see myself as a realist. I tell it like it is, but I'm also an idealist, that I recognize that we can do better. An observation of past mistakes is not a continued blame. It's a recognition that we can do better. Right, so I'm a realist in the classroom. I do my damnedest to tell it like it is, but I try to remind myself of the ideals this country represents and try to remind my students the same thing. You see, one of the things that y'all students need to understand is when we're up here, on a certain level, we're also in that seat, right? One of the beauties, God, one of the greatest things about teaching is that I get to learn alongside my colleagues, I get to learn alongside my students, and y'all keep us young. I know it doesn't look that way, right? I get that, but where it matters, right? Heart. You all keep us young. You keep us invigorated and excited about the future. So when we talk about the difficulties of a human experience, the difficulties of being an American, the trials that we have gone through, the mistakes we have made, understand that we're doing this for purpose and not just to browbeat you and say how horrible the United States has been, but a recognition that we can do better. Okay, you really need to pay attention to this and enjoy it. This took me forever to put together, okay? And those of you that had me in class before know my struggles with technology. So, a few cartoons referencing civil discourse or lack thereof. I like this one a lot. Civil discourse, and enter in the hardline partisans, the talk show of blowhards, the blogosphere, the screamers. And somehow we go from civil discourse, uncivil, and coarse. I wasn't supposed to do that. Damn, I practiced this. I like this one too. Fresh squeezed discord, refreshing civility. One of my classes, my humanitarian class, we've been talking about why it is that the loudest in the room seems to be the one most listened to. And probably it seems that the quieter ones tend to be a little more reflective. But that's not what sells. Loud sells, discord sells. Well, I like this one too. One of the things I want you to notice here, date 2012, and so it hasn't always been calm waters in the United States in terms of polarization. I'm so proud after 236 Independence Days, we can still have civil discourse. 2012. Spirit of 2014 doesn't really seem to have gotten any better. Civil public discourse. Oh, goodness. Extremist wingnuts. I believe that's what that says. God, those. This turkey is never going to thaw. How long has it been sitting out? Oh, since last Thanksgiving. Anybody have a tense Thanksgiving time with your family? And shoot, the Johnson household, the Myers household, when we get together, inevitably conversation falls to two things, right? Religion, politics. And we have some fairly heated discussions. They have gotten more heated, right? But there's still love, there's still respect there. That's one of the things that I want you to think about. We talk about civil discourse. I hear people throw out, I can't believe this idiot, this Trumper voted for that guy. I like to point out to them, well, you know, my aunt and uncle voted for Donald Trump. They're good and decent folk. I love them dearly. Oh my God, we can't let those libtards get into office. My mom and dad are liberals. They're godly. They're some of the most decent folk I've ever met. Words matter. Paint a picture. Speaking of pictures, is this it? Is this where we're at? Is this all we are? Is this us today? I choose to believe no. Now, the whole point of this is to kind of figure out how we can do better. How do we get past the us versus them mentality? And then I kind of had an epiphany. And this also took me forever. How do I know that's silly. It took me forever to figure out how to do that. How do I get past us versus them mentality? It's so easy to say, what is their freaking problem? And the reality is, I turn that finger back at us, me. What am I going to do? I know the phrase all politics is local politics is used in a completely different way than I'm going to use it. But what I want you to think about is this. This is an impossible problem. You can't take this all on and fix it one time. Ain't gonna happen. But this, the idea of all politics is local politics, empowers us to do something about that bigger problem. So when you think about the us versus them issue and how to fix it, how to remedy it, look to Maryville, look to your local community, and begin to interact with people of a different party, a different faith, a different viewpoint within your own neighborhoods, your own city, your own fraternity or sorority, whatever group that you're in. I guarantee you there's people of difference there. Talk to them. The only place that we can make any worthwhile change is right here. Right here. Get to know the other, right? And following them on Twitter ain't gonna cut it. In actuality, if you simply follow the other on Twitter, you're probably not gonna get the best of what they're offering, because they're behind their own veil, being angry and scared a lot of times. If you really want to get to know somebody, you can't just follow what they're writing on Twitter. Get to know them. I have been blessed in my life to live in different spheres. I have good family here at the university. I love and respect the people in my department, culture we have here. But I'm also blessed to be in a different sphere. And that's with my firefighter brothers and sisters. And those two spheres have different average political perspectives. Okay? One fairly liberal, the other fairly conservative. And somehow I've been blessed with the ability to float between those relatively easy. And it's fascinating when the other begins to see you for who you truly are and not some label that they have placed upon you before meeting you. And it's fantastic when you get to know somebody else and that label that you put on them disappears. And you see the other for who they truly are. So get to know the other person. It fascinates me. The first day of class, I do the same thing. You walk in, all the students are all nervous, nobody's talking to each other. I'm sitting here getting ready to start lecture, and all I do is this. Look to your left, look to your right, and make a new friend. And all of a sudden, it goes from silence to just a cacophony of new relationships breaking out. It's not that hard. Assume good intent. Assume good intent. There are different parties, there are different positions, but we are but one country. Constitution guarantees citizens the presumption of innocence. We ought to do the same thing. Right? An assumption of good intent. The other is not evil. They're simply different. They have oftentimes the same goal, which is the difference in terms of how we're going to get there. This is one that, again, I put that I there for a reason. This is something I need to practice. I need to work on. And this, for my classroom, is the one that I'm trying to take on right now. Instead of talking about taking a side, try using the language of taking a perspective. Right? If we talk about sides, it has that connotation inevitably of this side or that side. There's two, right? Two sides of the coin, there's up, there's down. We talk about sides, it makes it simple. But if we talk about perspectives, it guarantees there's one perspective, there's two perspectives. If we're talking about perspectives, it guarantees there's 3, 4 unknown. Right? So just the switch of language from a side to a perspective, it makes it easier for you to glide into that position and try to imagine what's driving the other to think the way that they do. What am I missing? There's a change in language. What goals? What is it we can agree on? And again, think local here. the vast majority of your college students. There is a real need in Maryville, Missouri for big brothers and big sisters. There's a waiting list of kids that are crying out for a mentor. Surely, Democrats, Republicans, Independents can see a need. Fill it. Look for common ground. And you can find that common ground in the eyes of a child. Be self-aware. Right? You are a complex thing. Right? I am a bubbling mess of contradictions. I get that. Right? And Mrs. Johnson was here. Oh my God. She would go off on how complicated I can be, how complex I can be, what a pain in the ass I can be at times. Be self-aware and recognize that you are complex. It makes it so much easier to recognize that the other is also complex and complicated. Avoid oversimplification and demonization. Name calling. Really? 2021? This is what we got? You know, people say sticks and stones can break my bones, words will never hurt me. Whoever said that is an idiot. Right? You know, I raised some tough kids. Let me check that. Danny and I raised some tough kids. And my kids took some flack because of my stance on city council. Got called libtard, other things like that. Right? You hear weirdo. Right? I'm proud of my son for maintaining his composure because he also has a little beast that tries to crawl up his chest every once in a while, something he and I both need to work on. But my daughter has a tendency to leave the chin. God, I'm so proud of her for that. Right? She just didn't hide away when people make fun of her or label her as this or that. She tries to seek out the other, right? The person that doesn't seem to have any friends. She seeks out the weirdos, the geeks. I have the utmost respect for her for that strength. Avoids the oversimplifications and demonization? Really? Just because the party affiliation is a different color, they're evil? Come on. At the very least, they have a shared humanity. And more to the point, for this conversation, in terms of American citizens, we're in the same boat. Okay. Let's see, I went off on a tangent and now I'm, all right, 30. So for me, what I'm working on the most right now is that perspective taking. Now, one of the things I would point you to, and I've got a list of sources and different websites that I would encourage you to look at. A lot of the more feel-good, how do we get along stuff isn't really my area. I'm a historian, but there is actually a tremendous site. It's called the Greater Good Science Center, and they put out some just fantastic work in terms of reconciliation, of how we as community are better together. When I first got on the website, I was like, oh my God, this is a bunch of hugging stuff and kumbaya. I don't need this. I need information. I started to read it, and there's some really good stuff there. Right? I'm going to end with one of those examples. Take a cue from Mr. Rogers. Shay Tuttle wrote in a book, Exactly As You Are, The Life and Faith of Mr. Rogers. And in that website I was talking about, I pulled a document from Tuttle that's entitled 7 Lessons from Mr. Rogers That Can Help Americans Be Neighbors Again. And I'll be honest with you folks, you would have been better served if I just would have emailed that to you and you read that and listened to me. Yeah, it's good. It's really good. Simple. It's familiar. It reminds us of stories we learned when we were children, right? Lessons that are so applicable today. And one of them kind of stuck with me. How did Mr. Rogers begin every episode? Beyond the singing. How did he greet people? Was it friend?
Neighbor.
It was neighbor, right? It wasn't friends, it wasn't acquaintances, it wasn't boys and girls, it wasn't ladies and gentlemen, it was neighbor. And this was done with intention. Mr. Rogers was a godly man, right? That use of neighbor was Bible talk. And Mr. Rogers was well versed as an ordained Presbyterian minister in Bible talk. So when he used the word neighbor, he did so with intention. He did so with Leviticus 19:18 in mind. He did so with Luke 10:25-37 in mind, in terms of how you ought to treat your neighbor. The polarization of American politics is too big for any one of us to deal with. But extending a hand to a neighbor can handle that. This is too big a problem to deal with. But extending a hand and listening, actually listening to the other side. No, check that. I meant to say listening to and trying to actually see a different perspective is the only way forward for us as a nation and us as people. That's too much to handle, folks. That's too much for one person to deal with. But extending a hand to a neighbor, right? Seeing the humanity in the person sitting next to you, that's a lesson that we've been learning for a long time as children. And somehow as adults, we forgot. I will close with this. Consider for a moment what we are as a nation. Who we are as a nation. Is the United States merely a bunch of lines on a map, or are we something more? Something grander, something nobler, something higher? I believe that it is the latter. The United States I want to leave to my children. And if I am so blessed to leave to my grandchildren, is an ideal and not a place. It is a process and not an end product. It is forever over the horizon. A place that we are continuously moving towards, but are never going to get. It is forever over the horizon, a point to which the people must strive. We have to do it together. Thanks for your time. Anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Which is fine with me. There's Thursday night football on, and I've got places to be.
Priorities.
So if not, thank you for your time and consideration. Enjoy the rest of your evening.